My earliest memories are bathed in the warm, comforting glow of Grandma's kitchen. The scent of cinnamon and brewing coffee was the perfume of my childhood, and her gentle, weathered hands were my first teachers. Grandma Mary was my world. She was the one who woke me up, braided my hair, packed my lunch, and waited for me after school. She was my constant, my anchor, my everything. Grandpa George, a quiet man with a booming laugh, was also there, a steady, loving presence. They were my parents. They just were. I knew, theoretically, that they were my grandparents. They'd explained it to me in simple terms when I was very small. My mom, their daughter, had passed away when I was a baby. My dad, they said, was never really in the picture. So, they stepped up. They raised me. It was a story I heard countless times, a tragedy gracefully overcome by love. I was their precious granddaughter, their second chance at raising a child, and I cherished that role. My aunts and uncles, grandma and grandpa's other children, were part of my extended family network. There were 3 of them: Uncle Jim, the oldest, a jovial, easygoing man; Aunt Sarah, the middle child, vibrant and always laughing; and Aunt Claire, the youngest. Claire was different. She was beautiful, yes, with a striking intensity, but also restless, almost melancholic. She lived in a nearby city, a successful artist, but her visits were infrequent and always brought a subtle tension into Grandma's house. When she did visit, she'd hover around me, her eyes filled with a strange, wistful sadness that I couldn't quite decipher. She'd bring me elaborate gifts, expensive art supplies, or books that were too advanced for my age, always a little more than the other aunts. I thought she was just being generous, perhaps making up for her frequent absences. I didn't realize then that her attention was a desperate struggle, a silent battle with a secret so profound it would shatter my world. Looking back, the cracks were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to my trusting heart. Grandma, usually so open, had certain topics she avoided like the plague. Any mention of my biological mother, the daughter she supposedly lost, would make her tighten her lips, her eyes becoming distant. "It's too painful, dear," she'd sigh. "Let's talk about something else." I respected her grief, never pushing. I simply accepted the narrative. My mother was a lost memory, a beautiful tragedy. Then there were the comments. People in the small town, old family friends, would occasionally make veiled remarks. "You're so much like Claire, aren't you?" Or, "It's amazing how much she favors your side of the family, Mary." My grandparents would always laugh a little too loudly, or quickly change the subject. "Oh, she gets it from her grandmother's side." But their explanations always felt a little too forced, their eyes flickering nervously towards Claire if she was present. Claire, meanwhile, would just offer a small, sad smile, her gaze lingering on me for a moment too long, a wistful look in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. I dismissed it as a strong family resemblance, a shared trait that happened to skip a generation. I didn't realize then that these were not just cracks, but gaping chasms, hinting at a truth far more profound than I could comprehend. My aunts and uncles, Jim and Sarah, also seemed to treat Claire differently. There was a quiet deference, almost a protectiveness, mixed with a subtle resentment. They'd sometimes have hushed, intense conversations in corners of the house, their voices low, their expressions grim. I'd catch snippets, "It's for the best," or "She needed a fresh start." I always assumed they were discussing some long-forgotten family drama, something from their youth. I didn't realize then that I was the core of their discussions. The most persistent crack, though, was the way Claire would sometimes look at me. Not just with wistfulness, but with an almost aching longing. It was the look of a parent, a primal connection that I unconsciously responded to. We had a bond, an undeniable pull, a resonance that went beyond niece and aunt. She understood me in ways my grandparents sometimes didn't, anticipating my thoughts, completing my sentences. I thought it was just a special connection, a spiritual kinship. I didn't realize then that my entire identity, my very existence, was built on a monumental lie, and my aunt was living a silent, agonizing truth. The truth, when it finally emerged, wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, agonizing unraveling, prompted by a desperate act of my aunt. It was a cold winter evening, years after Grandpa George had passed away, and Grandma Mary was frail, her health failing. Claire had been visiting more frequently, her restlessness replaced by a quiet urgency. She seemed to hover around Grandma, her eyes filled with a desperate longing to speak, a plea hanging unspoken in the air. Grandma, though, remained stoic, her lips sealed, clinging to her secrets even as she slipped away. I was by Grandma's bedside, holding her hand, my heart breaking with every shallow breath she took. Claire was also there, her face a mask of profound grief, her eyes red-rimmed. Uncle Jim and Aunt Sarah sat quietly, their faces etched with sorrow. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and unspoken goodbyes. In one of her last moments of lucidity, Grandma's eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, found mine. Her grip on my hand tightened. She looked at me, a profound sadness in her gaze, a desperate urgency in her eyes. Her lips parted, and she whispered, her voice barely audible, a ragged breath, "Claire, you're real, Mom." My breath hitched. My blood ran cold. The monitors beside her bed flatlined. Her grip loosened. She was gone. But her words. "Claire, you're real, Mom." The world went silent, then exploded into a million shattering pieces. It was like a sudden, brutal awakening, a blinding flash of lightning that illuminated the darkest corners of my life. My aunt was my biological mother. My grandma had raised me, but wasn't my true mother. The hushed whispers, the unsettling resemblance, Grandma's guardedness, Claire's longing gazes, the unspoken tension among the siblings, it all slammed into me at once, a tidal wave of sickening clarity. My entire childhood, every family memory, every shared laugh, was a carefully constructed lie, built on betrayal. The emotional chaos was instant, overwhelming. Heartbreak for Grandma, profound and raw, tinged with a devastating sense of betrayal. Anger at her, a hot, venomous rage at her calculated deception, her profound betrayal, the way she had sacrificed my truth for her secret. Shame, for being so blind, so naive, so utterly fooled by the people I trusted most. And silence. A deafening, echoing silence in that sterile hospital room, a silence that magnified the screams in my head. My life, my identity, everything I thought I knew about myself and my family, shattered in that single, devastating discovery. The woman I called Grandma was not my mother. The woman I called Aunt was. And my biological mother, Claire, had lived a silent, agonizing truth, denied the right to openly claim me, forced into the role of a loving aunt while watching another woman raise her child. And my grandma, the gentle, nurturing woman, was a master of deceit, orchestrating this elaborate charade, allowing me to believe she was my mother, while keeping her daughter's secret and mine. I looked at Claire, sitting beside the bed, weeping silently. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, filled with grief. But now, I saw something else there, a flicker of anguish, a deep-seated sadness that went beyond her loss of her mother. She knew. She had always known. She had been complicit in this lie. My entire existence had been a secret. And that's when I realized, they never loved me the way I loved them. What came after was a raw, visceral struggle for survival. I didn't want revenge that would just burn everything down, I wanted truth, understanding, and a chance to reclaim my identity. I needed peace, and peace wouldn't come from silence or passive acceptance. I stood there, frozen, reeling from Grandma's last words. Claire, my biological mother, was now openly sobbing, her gaze fixed on me, a mixture of despair and desperate hope in her eyes. Uncle Jim and Aunt Sarah looked utterly distraught, their faces etched with a shared, unspoken burden. I walked out of the hospital room, needing air, needing space, needing to process the earth-shattering truth. The revelation was a bomb that had just detonated inside me, rewriting every memory, every relationship, every fundamental belief. Grandma, my loving, selfless grandma, had orchestrated a decades-long deception. And Claire, my aunt, had lived a silent agony. The first person I confronted, the moment I could breathe again, was Claire. I found her in the waiting room, alone, her face buried in her hands. I sat beside her, my voice raw but firm. "Grandma's last words," I began, cutting straight to the heart of it. She said, "Claire, your real mom. Is it true, Claire? Are you my mother?" She flinched, visibly recoiling. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and resignation. She confirmed it. Her confession, when it came, was a broken, halting narrative, punctuated by gasps and tears. She told me about her youth, a whirlwind of artistic pursuits and a secret, tumultuous relationship. She had gotten pregnant, young and unmarried, terrified of her conservative parents' reaction. Grandma and Grandpa, in their desire to protect her from scandal and to give me a stable home, had proposed the unthinkable: they would raise me as their own, and Claire would remain Aunt Claire. It was a sacrifice, a desperate measure to save face and secure my future, but it had come at the cost of her own motherhood, and my truth. She spoke of the unbearable pain of watching me grow up, calling another woman Mom. The agonizing longing to hold me, to claim me, to tell me the truth. She had begged Grandma to tell me, especially as I grew older and the resemblance became undeniable, but Grandma always refused, terrified of shattering the illusion, of the potential fallout. Claire had lived a life of silent observation, loving me fiercely from the periphery, her heart aching with every missed opportunity to be my mother. The anger that ripped through me was unlike anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just my grandma's betrayal, it was Claire's complicity, her decades of silence. "You knew?" I whispered, my voice choked with betrayal. "All these years? You let me believe Grandma was my mother? You let me live this lie? You watched me grow up, and you said nothing?" She tried to apologize, but her words were drowned out by my own pain. The pain of a lifetime of missed connection, of a stolen truth. The next agonizing step was confronting Uncle Jim and Aunt Sarah. They arrived at Grandma's house, grief-stricken but also burdened by the truth Claire had finally shared with them. They confirmed everything, their faces etched with guilt. They, too, had been sworn to secrecy, part of the family compact. They offered their apologies, their understanding, but it was clear they had prioritized their parents' reputation and Claire's perceived well-being over my right to the truth. The aftermath was a seismic shock that ripped our family apart. The funeral was a tense affair, my emotions a chaotic storm beneath a veneer of composure. The perfect family image shattered. The perfect family image shattered. The town, small and gossipy, soon caught wind of the whispers, and the judgment, the pity, the endless speculation, was unbearable. My revenge wasn't about vindictiveness, it was about truth and reclamation. It was about bringing light to the darkness, about dismantling the lies that had shaped my entire life. I sought therapy, desperately trying to understand who I was, stripped of the identity I had always known. It was a journey of profound self-discovery, peeling back layers of a false self to find the authentic me. I decided to pursue a legal change to my birth certificate, to have Claire listed as my biological mother. It was a profoundly emotional act, a public declaration of my birthright, a formal annulment of the lie my grandma had perpetuated. It was a painful, often public process, forcing me to recount the story repeatedly, but it was a necessary step towards reclaiming my truth. My relationship with my aunts and uncles, Jim and Sarah, became strained. They struggled with the fallout, the judgment, and my decision to expose the truth. I understood their fear, their desire to protect the family, but I couldn't forgive their complicity in the decades of deception. I maintained contact, but the easy intimacy was gone, replaced by a polite, cautious respect. My relationship with Claire, my biological mother, was a journey of tentative rediscovery. We had years of lost time to make up for, years of unspoken emotions to navigate. It was messy, complicated, filled with joy and grief, new laughter and old tears. She was learning to be a mother, openly, for the first time, and I was learning to be her son, unburdened by secrets. We took trips, shared stories, explored our shared artistic passions. It was a new kind of family, built on honesty and a fierce, protective love. She finally got to claim me, openly and proudly, and I finally got to know my true mother. I didn't want revenge. I needed peace. And that peace began to bloom when I accepted that my story wasn't about their failure, but about my resilience. It was about standing up for the truth, about finding my own way, about proving that I could forge my own identity, even if it meant tearing down the foundations of my past. I found strength in truth, in the courage to seek it, and in the love of the person who was finally, truly, my own mother. My journey to truth was painful, but it led me to a profound understanding of who I am, and who truly protected my heart. I thought losing them would destroy me, but it made me who I am. Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who protects your heart.